So hello and welcome to the Global Mindfulness and Education Summit. My name is Chris Willard. I'm a mindfulness educator, psychologist, writer, and one of the hosts. And I'm so excited today to be speaking with Shantum Seth, who I met many, many years ago on a retreat with Thich Nhat Hanh, actually really what was the beginning of my journey about 20 years ago, exactly 20 years ago, in fact. And he does a number of really amazing things. He's a Dharma teacher in the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, but a native of and continues to live in India right now. He's speaking to us from just outside of Delhi. He is the founder of 11 Directions, Buddhapath, which bring travel to India and tourism, spiritual tourism, as well as the Ahimsa Trust. And I'm really excited to hear from him about his perspectives on mindfulness in India and what that means in 2019. So thank you so much, Shantum Seth, for being with us today.
No, thank you, Chris, and thank you for doing this. I think it's a need of our time to bring mindfulness into education, and I'm glad you're offering this as a source of experience and wisdom to people who just tune in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So can you share with us today just a little about yourself, what you do, and maybe just starting with your own journey with mindfulness? How did this get started for you?
Well, I was brought up in a reasonably conventional way. I was quite privileged in my education in India, got a very good corporate job. And at one stage but while I was in this job, I also had quite a lot of personal suffering. Like I got beaten up 3 times for my race. I was studying in England for being a black guy. I worked in the footwear industry. So when I came back to India to buy shoes, I found that the people who were working for 6 or 7 days a week, with a very skilled job, were earning less than what I was paying for my hotel for one night. So I started living with the Jatavs there, the shoemakers of Agra, and I got to know a lot more about how the poor live and the sort of oppression by caste. And so all these things were filtering into me. And very early on, at 23, I had a car crash, a very dramatic car crash in a sports car. And when I woke up in hospital, I realized, what have I done for anybody? And I thought I must change the world and change it now. So the only way I knew at that time was politics. So I became an activist, sort of street activist, and then organizing large demonstrations, going to jail, organizing like that. Wow. And then I burnt out. And I burnt out to the extent that I think it was like a breakdown. And I started looking for a way of being peace rather than just fighting for peace and fighting against injustice. And I realized I was becoming part of the problem because of my anger.
Right.
So then being brought up in India, you realize that, spirituality is a path to peace. So I went around the block, as it were. For 6-7 years, I wandered. I went to teachers, first from the Hindu tradition, and the Hindu tradition is very vast. There are many, many different traditions, so many different types of teachers. And I met very good teachers, but it wasn't quite my practice. There was either too much God or too much guru. And I'm a sort of agnostic by nature. Then I even met Quakers, Sufis, but slowly I started coming more and more towards Buddhism or the Buddha's teachings. And in that, I found that it had a number of components which really struck me. And one was the primacy of suffering. That we start with that. It isn't that we are waiting for some kingdom of God or something outside of this lived experience. So I think that struck me, that we have to work with the suffering for liberation or for happiness. The second thing I think was the interconnected nature of everything. I realized again that this idea of an individuated soul, which is very dominant in Indian culture, is actually also part of our problems because it justifies a caste system. It allows oppression of different sorts, and it also justifies a lot of sort of I, me, mine at one level. And then the practice of you have some choice in how you respond, skillfully to any sort of response. That you have some choice; it's not all fated, and that the practice of mindfulness can help you with that faculty of awareness, which then allows you to respond in a skillful way. and not in a habituated or reactive way. So I think that's what really started getting me more and more into Buddhism. And then I started meeting all sorts of teachers. So I met people from the Buddhist, from the Burmese tradition, from the Thai tradition, from the even teachers in England. And then I became a manager of a performing troupe, and we had a 2-month tour in the West Coast of America. So I became a bit like a seeker in America, on the West Coast of America. And there I met Korean teachers, Japanese, more in the Buddhist realm. And then I met Thich Nhat Hanh in 1987 at a retreat at the Ojai Foundation. He was leading a retreat for artists. And on the second day, when he was sharing some practice of walking meditation, I think for the first time I really touched peace in myself, not as an idea, but as a visceral experience. And then I knew that this practice of walking meditation or mindfulness while I walk can be a great practice for me. And then slowly, that was 1987. Now, of course, it's more than 30 years that Thich Nhat Hanh has been my guiding friend and teacher. And I feel very blessed that it is not just the practice of walking meditation, but engaged Buddhism, linking with my political thinking, but also my spiritual path, being both conjoined by this teacher.
Right. Absolutely. And can you share a little bit about some of the work you do? One of the things that you're known for is educating people through travel and through pilgrimage. Can you share a bit about that work and bringing mindfulness into travel and pilgrimage and spirituality?
Yeah, so I love travel, and I've always loved travel. Even when at one point I remember I had to sell my music system because I had to buy a ticket to Russia. I sold my motorcycle because I wanted to go somewhere. So it was a bit like that. So right through, since I've been a young man, I've always enjoyed travel.
Yeah.
But I've also realized that travel has been my great teacher, especially if I've been able to reflect while I travel and after I travel. And with the practice of sort of what I call mindful travel, you realize that this can be this can be transformative. So it started a little bit by Thich Nhat Hanh asking me to organize a Buddhist pilgrimage, to the sites of the Buddha in 1988. And at the end of the journey, Thich Nhat Hanh said, "Why don't you do this pilgrimage every year? It's a practice the Buddha suggested. And it's a practice that helps you not just develop qualities of humility and perseverance and patience, and but also helps you to get to know yourself." And I found that this pilgrimage became my practice. Every winter, whether I worked at the UN or I worked as a teacher, I did many jobs along the way. Every winter, I would go on pilgrimage to the Buddhist sites. And then at a certain point, I started taking other people. And I made it a form of a right livelihood for myself.
Yeah.
Later, I realized that this is so powerful as a way of self-learning and transformation that I decided to start doing for young people and teachers. Yeah. And these are not necessarily Buddhist journeys. These are any journeys. So we take people into village India. We take people to visit different facets of Indian culture or even outside of India. And it's a bit like a retreat on wheels. So every day we'll have a sitting practice in the morning and a reflective period in the evening. But in the middle, say after breakfast, we'll go to a site. I might tell stories about the Buddha's life or what is happening there. In the afternoon, we might go something deeply into India, meet some villagers, talk about parenting or talk about farming. And in the evening, we ask people what has struck them, what is striking them. And what you find when you're away from your habituated environment is that the different seeds in your consciousness get touched. Your understanding of beauty, of time, of space, of poverty, of all are sort of are touched in a new way. Yeah. And so what's happening is that those seeds are lying dormant in your consciousness, and because we're every day going in a habituated way, we just don't touch that. But suddenly those seeds of anxiety, of fear, of awe are touched. And then my job as a facilitator or as a teacher in this is to try and help people understand themselves in the context of this external bombardment. And India does bombard you. It bombards every sense of you. So it's so I think India is the great teacher, actually. It's just that we have to be patient in learning with this teacher. And so my role is as much of a facilitator. And because of my mindfulness practice and my practice as a Dharma teacher, I have the tools of the inner journey while making this outer journey.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And I similarly, especially when I was younger, before, I had a family, and this has come up in a few other interviews, spent so much time traveling, just every summer, kind of like selling whatever I could to pay for my next plane ticket to go backpack around South America or India or Southeast Asia or whatever it might be. And to me, it actually really did come directly out of the retreat experiences I'd had out in Western Massachusetts, or the retreat experiences I'd had with Thich Nhat Hanh. There is something about travel, and that is something like a retreat on wheels. Like, it really just, it brings out, it can bring out the best, or it can bring out the worst in us in some ways. But we're face to face with all of our own stuff. And how do we problem solve, and how do we manage challenging situations, and what do we do in the face of our own discomfort, and certainly what do we do in the face of the suffering of others. And I think a skilled facilitation with that, which is, it sounds like a lot of what you do, also can really then help water those seeds of more compassion, more mindfulness, and and really what these original teachings are about is encountering suffering and transforming that into a desire to help alleviate that suffering in the world. And so I appreciate that work and the way you describe it. Yeah.
No, very much. It's a bit like a sesshin, but also you treat everyone as your teacher. So a beggar comes to you, and you, instead of I always say, don't give immediately, because that will take away the experience. But feel what is happening inside you. Wow. Is it compassion? Is it empathy? Is it fear? Is it guilt? What is coming up for you? Right. And then when we discuss it, I also feel that these journeys are much more powerful when they're done as a group. Because everyone has the same experience, but a different view. And each one's view is as valid. Right. So then after 3 or 4 days, you start traveling much more as an organism than a set of individuals. Right. And so you let go of my I. Yeah. And you also realize that everyone's suffering is your suffering, and everyone's happiness is your happiness. And this is much stronger when you do it as a sangha, as a community. So there are lots of elements to this sort of transformative travel or mindful journeys, or a pilgrimage in a deeper sense. Right. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And can you share a bit also about the work of the Ahimsa Trust, where that came about, and what kinds of work that you're doing?
Okay, I've just got 10% battery, but I'll just see.
Talk fast.
I don't know. I just popped up. But Ahimsa Trust was set up in 1996, primarily because I'd been working with the UN, and I found that when you get funding from the UN, it sort of dries up. I was managing a program in 16 countries, and also in Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and India with artisans. And we felt that we would like to continue this work. It was a bit like a globalization from below. And so we set this up. And then in 1997, Thich Nhat Hanh was coming to India. And so all the work that we've done for Thich Nhat Hanh, we did through the trust. So it basically became two-pronged. One was for the social development work and educational work, and then the Dharma work. But now Ahimsa Trust actually represents Thich Nhat Hanh in India. All the work of Sangha is done through Ahimsa Trust. And Ahimsa Trust has continued some of the social development work, but is doing a lot of work on bringing mindfulness to mainstream India, especially through education. Yeah. So we started doing this in 2001, in fact, before 2001. And now we've worked with thousands of teachers, hundreds of schools across India. We've worked with bringing it into main teacher training curriculum. Wow. So all sorts of elements in education, and more working with teachers than with students now. And the other, we've also working with people like the police and the paramilitary, people who are working in very, very difficult situations, who see some of the worst aspects of human nature and how to handle those with some compassion and awareness, rather than a reactive, go for your gun type
Right.
attitude. But also understanding that they are under great stress, they suffer from depressions, potential suicide, and so how to look at practice of mindfulness to help them in their lives and with their families. So also create harmony in their family. So I feel that a lot of the teachings of mindfulness practice, especially in the way that Thich Nhat Hanh has taught it, to embody it within everything you do, and including with relationships and family, is very important. With children. So I think so. And so Ahimsa Trust does social development work, village development. We work in villages in Bengal where we work with Muslim communities, Hindu communities, tribal communities. So we work with education. We'd also sponsor a number of people for school education, just pay for. So it's a social development thing plus educational through the Dhamma and through mindfulness.
Yeah. Have you found, is it pretty natural to be teaching mindfulness in the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, or is there resistance or uncertainty about this slightly different, perhaps, view of contemplative practice than might be more dominant, or has it been a pretty natural fit and well received?
I think it's a natural fit for me. And so when you teach what you love, it seems pretty natural. But the society around has not been able to embrace it as much as the effort we put in. There's a huge interest, but it hasn't caught on like in the West. And now mindfulness is entering our society a little bit because of the West, right, because of the science behind it. And now, because you see, mindfulness came out of the Buddhist tradition to a large degree. At least the Buddha talked about even in his first talk in Sarnath on the Eightfold Path. But Buddhism died in India in the 13th century. So that stream pretty much dried up of mindfulness as a practice from the Buddhist tradition. Of course, many other traditions have mindfulness as a practice, but not so much as that faculty of awareness or the energy of meditation being emphasized. So I think by us bringing in this aspect of Thich Nhat Hanh's practice, he's popular. When he came to India, we had him speaking to 250,000 people. Oh, he was on TV. Wow. We had retreats for educators, 500 people. We had retreats for 1,000 people in Delhi. So he was quite big. He spoke to Parliament. He's one of the first leaders to speak in Parliament like this, or religious leaders, even in a country of religion. So we did a walking meditation, if you know India, on Rajpath, which is the house from the president's house to India Gate, which is like the Champs-Élysées of India. Yeah. So we had, he really became well known here. But India has so many spiritual practices, right, that and some of them are quite cultish. They tend to be more attractive, and for most people, a sort of a spiritual path which has a lot of devotional elements is much more attractive because of our emotional nature. So Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition requires work. You have to work on yourself. Mindfulness practice is not just a sort of feel-good pill, right, or external. So that's why. But it is taking root now in education, and because it is it's sort of taken out of the Buddha world in some way. Right. When we go to schools, even though monks and nuns from Plum Village may come and teach, or as other lay teachers teach, there is a great deal of acceptance because they're seeing the beneficial effects. Yeah, absolutely. In their own lives, and And
it's inspiring to hear kind of working with, one of the things that always fascinates me when I travel to India is that it's crazy that it's one country. It's really, like dozens, if not hundreds of nations and cultures, all just because of colonialism, sort of like with a, line drawn around it. And so incredibly diverse, and what a challenge to be kind of bringing this work to so many different groups. And I appreciate so much that you're working, as you said, like in villages, in cities, with the Muslim populations, with Hindu populations, with police, with teachers. It's fascinating to hear that,
and geographically, we get people from, just this weekend, we have people from Kerala, even in our core team of teachers.
Mm-hmm.
We were just seeing, we had somebody from Andhra Pradesh, somebody from Kerala, somebody from Kashmir, somebody from Himachal, somebody from UP, somebody from Bengal. And this was just in a core team of 8 of us.
Yeah.
And the people in the audience were from everywhere, from Assam, from Gujarat. So you're right, India is very, very diverse, and yet the language, or I should say the practice of mindfulness, the practice of this faculty of awareness and the energy of, knowing what is going on within you and around you is universal.
Right.
And it touches everyone and it benefits everyone. And I think, and young and old and everything. So I think you're right, it's a diverse country, and yet certain elements of this practice are, as the Buddha said, actually, the Buddha said this is you don't discriminate by anything, by genders, or by caste or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. What it's also interesting. One of the things that's come up a lot in conversations with people all over the world is this idea of there's this interest in sharing this with kids, and a lot of us tend to start there, and then we start backing up a little bit and working a lot more with the parents, with the teachers, with the adults in the kids' lives. How did you start to come to that revelation that might be as if not more effective?
No, you're right, because the first time I ever did this was for young women students, girls, in a school where the head said that my students are very stressed out for their exams. Can you help them? So I just taught them some basic breathing practices and walking practices before their exams and how to pause. And it really helped them a lot.
Yeah.
So I realized it works with young people. And then when I went to the American Embassy School here in Delhi, where the director asked me to come. And I said, do you want it for the kids? He said, no, I want it for the teachers. They're totally stressed. And we did a 10-week course. This was in 2001, just after 9/11. And they were really suffering. And now this group still goes on every Tuesday or every Wednesday, once a week. They've been meeting now for 18 years. And all the teachers who started have left, but different people keep this mindfulness practice going.
Wow.
So that is the teachers. And then we started finding the teachers are other sort of full-time people. They need to embody the practice. So I always say the unwritten curriculum is the presence of the teacher in the class. But when we have time and energy, because we don't have enough of our teachers, we do things like at one school, we did 3 days with students, 3 days with teachers, and 1 day with parents. So it is called the Vasant Valley School. We did a 7-day retreat. And that's great. And teachers mean also admin staff and others. So we want to make these mindful schools, the whole culture of a spiritually based sort of school where where you can touch peace and you can create a happy environment. So it's partly because of our own limitations that we can't work with young people. We don't have enough teachers, but that's why we're doing teacher training.
Mm-hmm.
And now, as I said in the beginning, the curriculum, for example, in Delhi, all the teachers who are being trained in Delhi, they have to do a 3-day retreat in mindfulness as part of their course. It's now embedded in their curriculum.
Wow.
But they don't know what to do. So then we are helping them develop those sort of elements. What does mindfulness mean? Otherwise, they just end up doing yoga.
Right. Interesting. So interesting. Oh my gosh. And it sounds like it's been, it's been well received, like by the teachers. And, have you gotten pushback or not particularly?
Yeah, no, not pushback much. Actually, we've been very lucky. I think we've got very good feedback right from politicians to bureaucrats. And we do this with government schools. We do this in the state of Uttarakhand. We've been working with the government schools and the government teachers. And, hundreds, if not thousands of them. And so now we're feeling that, it's been accepted. It's been accepted. And we came into this mindfulness field first in a sort of way.
Yeah.
There was no MBSR, there was no MBCT. We were just the mindfulness guys.
Right.
Thich Nhat Hanh was the first one with the mindfulness thing.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get overtaken because the other things are much more out in the web and everything.
Right.
We're still in a bit like the elephant which plods along slowly. And that's Thich Nhat Hanh's style, and that's our Sangha style, Plum Village style.
Yeah.
But I think it's been really, has been taken well. And that's why we're getting the head of the police forces coming to us.
Right.
And we're not searching them out at all. Somebody just rings up and said, I'd like to, can you come here and do this? And we say, oops, okay. And the corporate sector, we don't do much with them because we don't have the, the enthusiasm and energy to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's important. Mm-hmm. But when anybody from the teaching community asks us, we immediately say yes.
Right.
And we've been doing national workshops, which have thousands, hundreds of people every year coming from all around India. And we do at least one national workshop a year since 2008.
That's wonderful.
So,
yeah.
So we are training up a cadre. We don't know where it'll go, but I think for teachers themselves, it's very healing. It helps them.
Right.
It's a very, very stressful job.
And I can't imagine it's probably, it's stressful in the US. I'm sure it's stressful everywhere. And I'm sure it's got its own particularly unique stresses in India, anywhere in India.
Teachers don't have blackboards. They don't have tables. They don't have pens and pencils. Practically have no roof in some cases.
Right.
I remember one guy coming and saying, I haven't slept well for 6 years until this retreat. 6 years.
Gosh. Wow.
Things like so I mean, the effects are huge. And then, of course, for many kids, it's very tough because they live in very poor situations. They live in situations where there's violence in the home. So when they come to school, it's actually a chance for them to touch some sort of beauty and peace and happiness in themselves if the teachers can allow that.
Right.
Because otherwise, they see even their homes people are struggling, in poverty and in situations of real extreme oppression,
right?
Drunkenness, all these things, family violence, especially gender violence, marital violence.
Right. And for the kids to be facing that, for them to be bringing it to school, for the teachers to be hearing about that and trying to work with the kids around that, and just to give them some skills for how to manage. And again, just like with travel, how do we transform the encounter with suffering into wisdom and compassion somehow, but giving teachers that same opportunity through mindfulness, which to me can be a catalyst for that. So what else are you seeing? I guess one thing I was curious about is what else is happening in India around mindfulness, and in a sense, this modern, reimagining of mindfulness in the research. Are you hearing more about MBSR and other things? I had this very strange experience last year where I was invited to what was billed as the first mindfulness conference in India, which is obviously not after 2,500 years of tradition. But where else are you seeing kind of mindfulness re-arising or westernized mindfulness re-arising in India? And what are your thoughts on that?
So I had more of a mixed view towards it earlier, but now I feel anything going in this direction is good, broadly, because it helps people. But you're right, there's been a corporatization of mindfulness, which has come mainly from the West. It's come into India. So, what is now popularly known as mindfulness is happening in India too, especially with, as you're saying, the first mindfulness conference, etc. So I think there's a sort of and the corporate sector is getting interested, but the corporate sector is getting interested because of the West, not because of India.
Right.
So it's a bit like the yoga effect. In the early 80s, I was teaching yoga, and I remember going to an international yoga conference in Delhi, and there were only 8 of us with one threadbare carpet. Nobody really interested. Today, everyone has their own personal yoga trainer in the middle classes. And it's because Jane Fonda and Sting and others have taken it up, and it's become very popular in the West. So it's that yoga pizza effect that is now. So I think mindfulness is coming to India through the West in that way.
Right.
But it has the ground is very, very fertile. It's part of our own heritage. So we realize that it's something that it's like pouring water on a very parched land, and the seed is there to sprout. And you can see much deeper into that, the potency of that seed than as a technique. But it really becomes an embodiment of practice and your life. So I think the potential in India is huge. And I feel that this path through the scientific and through the sort of corporate type of corporatization of mindfulness, not bad. Not bad. I mean, I think everyone does the best they can at the level they can.
Right.
And all of us are trying our best. So, I don't want to be critical of people for trying it. I think what is important is that we practice.
Right.
And if we practice and we share what we practice rather than we share ideas and, concepts, then it's better, much more helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But then all of us started with some concept and reading about, like I said, the understanding of
Right.
independence. And you say, oh, wow, that's a good idea. And then when you start practicing it and you realize that you yourself have a sort of a completely, conditioned reality,
Yeah.
sometimes comes from an understanding first and then the practice. So I
Right.
think all is good. It's better
Yeah.
than, many
Yeah.
other things you can
Better
do
than the
about it.
other options. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And with children, I saw your daughter go, just being in that environment,
Right.
just letting her, not having to teach her something, but or say, okay, putting a little boat on her stomach and letting it feel up
Mm-hmm.
and down, feel her
Yeah.
breath and making it fun. These are
Right.
little games you can play, but who knows where it'll affect. But really, we have to train the young mind to know how to handle their emotions, how to come back to their breath, how to
Right.
be able to use that present moment awareness and not be reactive. And
Yeah.
also then able to look at their habit energies, whether it's their own or their families or their
Mm-hmm.
culture's habit energies, their own, and not do destructive things to themselves
Right.
or others. So these sort of elements, wherever it's coming from,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's through, a 2-hour lecture on mindfulness by some, guy, or whether it's a 5-day retreat, whatever it is, I think it's all good.
Yeah.
And I feel people like John Kabat-Zinn have done a good job in that sense of, bringing this out to the world.
Yeah.
People like Thich Nhat Hanh, who is considered in a way the father of mindfulness because he was writing books like The Miracle of Mindfulness well before it became popular in the West.
Right.
But still, with all the efforts and the popularity of mindfulness has only grown because of people like John Kabat-Zinn or Richie Davidson and doing
Mm-hmm.
the research and making it, showing that, because of the neuroplasticity or the epigenetics and all that stuff, then people say, yes, we will, this is interesting for us because, we can restructure our brain, or we can,
Right.
actually, handle our depression or anxiety.
Yeah.
So it's not just a spiritual path,
Right.
but not just a spiritual path of liberation, but also of transforming. So I think the secular language is important. So you're right. It's a bit strange to hear that it's the first global conference on mindfulness, but a lot of what is the skill of the West is marketing and branding.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
if we can bring the science and spirituality together, maybe the branding and the authenticity together,
Yeah.
then there's hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Shantum Seth, for joining us and sharing your thoughts and sharing your experience also in bringing this work of mindfulness out, and keeping Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition alive, which is so near and dear to my heart and many of the other speakers and listeners as well. If people want to learn more about you and what you do, can they just look up Ahimsa Trust or look up 11 Directions or Buddhapath? What's the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, that's probably the best way. And then you find an email there, which was, so even 11directions.com, Buddhapath.com, or ahimsatrust.org.
Great.
They're all 3 ways to get in touch with us. And we are a Sangha, a community of people who are trying to work together. It's Ahimsa Trust is a totally volunteer-based organization. So 10 to 12% of whatever is earned in 11 Directions and Buddhapath is put towards Ahimsa Trust. That's how it keeps going. And we're always happy to receive donations of time, energy. We're setting up I should have mentioned, we're setting up a mindfulness practice center in Dehradun.
Wonderful.
So it's like a Plum Village, India. That's
Yeah.
basically the idea. We're calling
Yeah.
it Jamun Village.
Uh-huh.
Jamun is the tree under which the Buddha had his first meditation when he was 9 years old. So it's the idea around bringing mindfulness to children, to schools. And Dehradun is an educational capital of North India. So the whole idea is to bring that. So we've donated the land to the trust, and now we want to build things, and we're holding a few retreats. We're getting the monks and nuns of Plum Village coming this December. So every year we invite them to lead retreats in India. So that's we can find out about that through Buddhapath or Ahimsa Trust. And if you want to support, then we can do that also. And in America, we're just setting up what is called a 501c3. So people can help, can donate tax deductible in America.
Yeah.
So we feel ourselves as a part of a global community. I
Yeah.
don't think it's just India. I think India has been the root and the spiritual base of many, many traditions, and especially of mindfulness.
Yeah.
But I think that now it's spread its wings, and it's a bit like a banyan tree, which has many, many aerial trunks. And whether it's America or Poland or Japan, we all are feeding into this global family of mindfulness and awareness, global
Yeah.
awareness, and a collective shift in consciousness, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and look forward to staying in touch. Yeah. Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. And nice meeting you again across this Zoom world.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Take care.